So the Strait of Hormuz is closed again, and over the weekend, the United States and Iran exchanged fire, and this threatens to become a serious regional war now that Oman, Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait have also been targeted. Fundamentally, the United States says that the Strait of Hormuz cannot be controlled by Iran, and Iran says it is controlling the Strait of Hormuz. It boils it all down to oil. This is a war about oil, and if the remains closed, then fuel prices will increase, inflation will come back, and countries like India will pay a massive price. In this video, we're going to look at everything that is happening so far to figure out how bad this could possibly become. And we'll also answer three interesting angles that others have not looked at. Things like insurance, the price of oil, and what China is doing. So before we get to it, remember, like, share, subscribe, sign up for our membership where you will get access to one news bulletin every day. It is just the news stripped away. We've taken out all of the other drama, the trauma, the visuals, anything that can bother you. The news in 10 minutes if you become our member. Let's take a look at today. We're back to square one. A few weeks ago, we were talking about the possibility of moving towards just diplomacy and not firing guns. Well, regional mediators, Qatar, Egypt, Pakistan, were attempting to bring both sides to the table, but that cautious optimism has evaporated completely. Over the weekend, Iran has attacked a commercial container ship at the Strait of Hormuz. The attack immediately raised fears that Iran was returning to the strategy that it's been using this entire time, which is close the strait and use it as leverage. The United States responded very swiftly. American forces launched strikes on dozens of Iran's military targets, including radar installations, air defense systems, missile infrastructure, drone facilities, and fast attack boats. Iran retaliated again. According to its Revolutionary Guard, they targeted American facilities in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Oman, and in Jordan's air base as well. Jordan says it intercepted 4 missiles fired from Iranian territory. Kuwait says it intercepted hostile aerial targets over its airspace. In other words, this, which was a bilateral conflict, is now threatening to spread right across the Gulf. Now, the real question here is not for territory, it is for oil. It is about the Strait of Hormuz. Fundamentally, that's where the statements between Washington and Tehran really matter, the statements that are coming today. America's Central Command has declared that Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have responded almost immediately and said quite bluntly, the strait is our territory. Iran has also warned that vessel routes it has not approved cannot be guaranteed safe passage. And this is an extraordinary statement because it's not simply about geography. It basically is saying we will get to decide who gets to trade and who uninterrupted or not, who gets safe trade and who does not. And Iran knows exactly why this matters because, like we've said in the past, militarily it cannot match the United States, but this leverage can actually hold the entire world from Europe to China to India hostage. Now, here's the interesting thing, and this is where I'm going to take it a step further from what we know in public domain. There's further analysis that we should be looking at. From America's point of view, they're in a very different position than they were at the start of this conflict. CNN reports that key American missile stockpiles have already depleted significantly. Experts from the Center for Strategic International Studies say that if operations continue at their present pace, the United States could begin taking greater significant strategic risks elsewhere, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. Now, apparently, American military has to maintain a certain sort of readiness for a potential conflict either with China or with North Korea at all points, as CNN reports. But since the start of this fighting, apparently the Pentagon has said that it has used nearly half of its THAAD missile operators, half of its Patriot interceptors, and 30% of its Tomahawk missile cruise missiles. Brookings institutional analyst Michael O'Halloran says that there is no doubt American stockpiles are now lower than military planners would ideally like to have them. And the situation with armaments could impact America's ability to be ready for conflict with China and North Korea. So it's starting to have to make sacrifices and tough decisions in other parts of the world. On the 13th of July, Mark Kagan, who is a retired Marine Corps colonel and a defense analyst, basically says if the war continues at the rate it's been going in the last 5 days, we could risk reducing stockpiles enough that new high-level risks will now come up in the Indo-Pacific. So America, it's not just a question about domestic politics and what this means for Congress and what this means for their midterm polls. It's also about just simply running out of out of armament. And that doesn't mean that their armaments are running low. It means they're going to have to start pulling from other readiness from other parts of the world. This is not ideal for them. This is not something that they would like. Now, in the meantime, if we look at why Iran is choking the Strait of Hormuz, there are multiple layers. One is obviously the price of oil, and we have seen Brent has already gone up. The September futures is now touching $80 a barrel at $78.8 a barrel. This is the highest it's been since the 22nd of June. This is because shipping through Hormuz has fallen drastically, and the maritime traffic tracking shows commercial operators are reassessing their risk. Now, what happens when commercial operators reassess their risk? Because it's not just about the price of fuel, it's the price of shipping, it's the price of insurance on top of that shipping. And I'll tell you what this is. One of the most and the important and least understood aspects about this conflict, which will be about the outcome, is not United States or Iran. It's about private shipping companies. The United States can insist that the Strait of Hormuz stays open, and if Iran threatens to fire at every ship that comes through, ultimately the owners of commercial vehicles, commercial vessels that are doing the shipping will decide that it's simply not safe to use. And they will decide whether or not anything will pass through. So that matters because Iran doesn't need to physically close the Strait of Hormuz. It only needs to create enough sort of uncertainty for shipping companies to choose to simply avoid it. If enough shipping commercial operators stay away, it'll be the same as a blockade effectively. So a fewer ships would mean slower deliveries, tighter supplies, higher transportation costs, and that would be the leverage that Iran is actually going after. The second layer of that leverage is every commercial ship traveling through that conflict zone carries a war risk, and this will actually increase the insurance premiums that cover that voyage. So those extra costs are passed on to the shipping companies. The shipping companies pass it on to energy traders and eventually to consumers. So if no oil tank is sunk, the perceived danger is enough to drive up the insurance prices. And that's why energy prices often rise long before there's actual shortage of oil. The cost of everything is fuel, shipping, and insurance on top of the shipping. Now, for countries like India, which rely heavily on imported energy, those additional costs will actually filter through every single household. Now, why does this matter for India? You know the numbers I've told you before. 40% of our crude, 80% of our oil comes in from overseas. Then there is our LPG, which is almost 90% of our LPG comes simply through the Strait of Hormuz. And the impact on this conflict will hit every single Indian household. Energy economist Kirit Parekh has warned that a prolonged conflict will increase India's oil and gas import bill. And he has urged Delhi to actively engage with Washington and Tehran to make sure that this does not happen. There's another angle to this. It's not just the price of fuel that will affect every single one of us. When ships are attacked, like we saw it happen this weekend, invariably there are Indian sailors on board. According to a report by Bloomberg last week, as many as 9 Indian ships are stranded in the Strait of Hormuz. 198 mariners on board. The government is considering holding talks with Iran for safe passage for 9 laden tankers. Now, the movement of these vessels that are loaded with crude oil and LPG are being closely monitored, and it's important for the safety of our crew. As you know, there was one ship that was attacked, and almost everybody on that ship was safe except one person who was missing. That ship this weekend also had Indian seafarers on board. So not only are we worried right now about the price of fuel, we're also going to be worried about the shipping costs and the insurance costs and our seafarers being kept safe. Now, there's one big player in all of this who has been extremely quiet and watching quietly from the sidelines, and that is China. And that's the third angle that I'm bringing to you. While most of the world's attention has been focused on Washington and Tehran, China has received very little attention of its role in all of this. China is the largest importer of crude oil from the Gulf. So it has a significant share of everything that's coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. So any prolonged disruption will actually hit China's energy security as well, its manufacturing sector, and its economic growth. Now, this puts Beijing in a very complicated position because China has maintained ties with Iran while also relying heavily on stable operations with other Gulf countries. So therefore, it has It does not really want to see the Strait of Hormuz being turned into a battlefield one more time, because that conflict is something that China itself would rather like to avoid. So China has a big stake right now in making sure that this entire conflict cools off. At the same time, Iran has said repeatedly that it might choose which country to let through or not. That may or may not mean China. But even so, the total price of fuel across the world will go up, and even, and that might not be the only solution for China. If Iran lets only Chinese ships through, it still will not keep the prices cool enough for China to be able to manage its economy. It's a very large economy. It guzzles a lot of power. The other challenge that's happening to the US, which needs to be winded, is the fact that when it started this conflict with Iran, they had oil energy security reserves. They have been depleting through their energy security reserves as well. So, on one hand, you have Iran that is fully aware that the Strait of Hormuz is its leverage and is choking one more time to be able to get what it wants from the negotiating table with America. On the other hand, America, Donald Trump coming off looking hot headed, saying, how dare they say kill Trump? I'm going to obliterate them. This is not what that is about. A lot of people think that Trump is reacting to posters at the funeral in Iran saying kill Trump. I believe Trump is reacting to the Strait of Hormuz and the price of oil. And this is fundamentally where this conflict is. And they're going to have to figure this out, because the rest of the world simply cannot afford to hold its breath again for this long. So will the other countries get together and manage to find a way out of this diplomatically? Or are we going to be plunged as a country in India into more uncertainty? You'll have to watch and see.